Okay, and we are now live for another edition of Tech Talks, streaming on Zoom and on YouTube. And my good colleague Nick is leading the show today, where we are talking about course templates in Canvas. You might have also heard them called master courses, but we don't really like that term for kind of obvious reasons, I think. So we were trying to think of what's a more appropriate terminology for using Canvas shell to kind of host your material outside of a live class. And we settled on template courses, which hopefully is self-explanatory enough. So Jennifer said in the chat, she said, what about Blueprint? Well, the problem with Blueprint is there's also a different setting in Canvas called Blueprint courses, which we have talked about in the past, but which have like a lot of weird quirks and limitations to it. So much so that we don't really recommend it for most situations now that we have played with it enough. Unfortunately, it was kind of a learning experience. But Nick is going to talk about template courses.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. I appreciate the introduction. As Caleb said, we're going to be talking about template courses, and we can think of that as a whole using Canvas and a specific shell, so a course shell, to host, develop, share materials outside of, say, a past classroom environment, so a course that's ended or a course that will be live. So places where there are actually students in the course. So this is something that we have, that we can play around with it, sandbox in, and we don't have to worry about any of that. We can also invite collaborators into this space. So it just adds a lot more flexibility than we would get normally. And a lot of the tools that we'll talk about through this kind of workflow of using a template course and pulling material into it, pushing material out of it, can be used for all sorts of other purposes, whether you're hosting content in Canvas for a departmental reason or, like I said, want to test something out. So with that, I did want to say, I know I am in a classroom without a mask on. I am the only person in here. I want to give that disclaimer before I start speaking a lot. I am being selfish and there's nobody else in here. I feel like I'm the sage on the stage talking to empty seats, but I did want to put that disclaimer. We are social distancing. All right, so without further ado, we'll start going into the workflow. I do consider template courses one of the easier things you can do in Canvas. Now that I've said that, I'm sure we'll get a lot of really great questions about it. So keep that in mind. Interrupt me as you see fit. There's no bad questions here, even if you just want to ask about a particular situation that's for you. So let's do this. I'm gonna get our room going. So what we're doing is we're starting off on the dashboard in Canvas.
Nick, do you want to maybe zoom in a little bit just so we can see a little better?
Yeah. Yeah, and let me know if anything looks a little bit cut off. I should have the same exact view, but just in case. So right now we're starting on the dashboard. So we logged into Canvas. First page we see, I've got all of my course tiles up front and center. And if I start to scroll down, the first thing that we need to do for a template course is we're actually going to create that space. So I'm going to actually go down in the bottom right. So this is at the bottom of your dashboard. Click Start a New Course. And it's as simple as selecting the account. For instructors, you will have a multitude less than what I've got. Being an admin, I have access to a lot more accounts than most people. For our instructors, you're going to have an option for Community Colleges of Spokane or manually created courses. I was talking to Jerry about this the other day. The preference for when you're creating a template course or something that isn't going to be associated with a class that has students in it, so isn't being populated by CTC Link, manually created courses is where it's at. Click that, and now I get to choose a course name. So depending on how you've got your dashboard laid out, naming conventions, your preferences, all that fun stuff can come here. Generally, what I try to do is make it really easy. If I'm sharing this course with Caleb, I want them to know exactly what course it's a template for, as well as it's unique enough that I can find it when I'm trying to take content out and put content in, and that'll make a little bit more sense later. So
and also unique enough that if something goes wrong, it's easy for us to find it as well. If it's just called the sandbox, we don't know whose sandbox it is, but if it's, yeah, something more identifiable.
Great example. So what I'll end up doing is I'm going to focus on a learning analytics course that actually Ben ran. So say Ben and I were working on a project together. I wanted to create a template of that, use it to host materials, push them out, all that fun stuff. I'd probably start by being pretty self-explanatory. Learning. Oh, got the wrong keyboard. In this case, there's only one course like that. It's not something you find on the course catalogs for the students, so I can keep it pretty simple. But I've seen, people use the codes and stuff like that. So sky's the limit. But the important thing for me is I'm going to be using this template as my keyword to find it later. So I got my learning analytics development template. Click create. And it's going to think for a little bit, and boom, I've got a course shell. It's empty, but it's got the name that we just chose. And I now have my sandbox space that quick, right? Now I can start kind of monkeying around and getting things the way I like it. So something to note is if I come to the home page, once again, it's completely blank. You're not going to find any materials in here. You'll be the only person in here, all that fun stuff. I could start by maybe adding Caleb if he was a collaborator. Since this is our space, he can be another teacher with me, and that'll actually help with carrying content over. If he wants to later, as a teacher, you can only bring in content that you are the teacher for that course. So just keep those roles in mind. But let's start by actually populating this with something. So in this scenario, we had a learning analytics development course that Ben ran in the fall. So I want to bring that over into a place that I know is going to be static. I got more control over here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump down to settings, bottom left. This is in the course navigation. And then I'm going to go over to the right-hand side. And under course status, you'll see it's unpublished currently, but I'm going to come down until I find import course content. I click into that. Now I've got my import screen. So this is how I'm going to bring content into the course. So in this case, I'm basically going to copy an entire course that we already ran into this space, develop it further, do all my editing, bring stuff in, and then push it out when we've got a live version to do so with. So say we've got another course going in spring, I'd wait till kind of Jerry goes through the process of publishing those and getting those ready. Then I would bring everything over. So we're going to select the content type. There's a lot of options in here. I think the one we're going to be using the most is copy a Canvas course. Don't expect most people will actually interact with any of the other materials. And if you are, that'd be definitely something you'd want to reach out to us for if you're importing content from other LMSs and stuff like that. But in this case, we get to do the simple stuff. We're just going to copy a Canvas course. And remember how we were talking about naming conventions, what's your preference, how are you going to find it later? That's where this comes into play. As an admin, when I start typing in here, I'm going to see basically all courses that are in our Canvas instance. For you, our instructors, you're going to see only the courses that you are a teacher in. So in this case, that's for me, my keywords are very important because it's going to be sifting through a lot. But I know that I had template in there, and that's a pretty unique word. There's not a lot that's going to come through. Oh, and would you look at that? As an admin, I've got all the other template courses that people have made. Well, that's not too helpful for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in learning. Oops, let's type it right. Learning analytics development. Also a good reason to keep names short. There we go. The only one of its kind. I did a good job. I chose a unique name. Once again for, oh, there we go. For those of you, there we go. For for those of you that are instructors, once again, it's going to be a much simpler list, only things that you've been a teacher in. If I include completed courses, that's also going to give us that essentially old courses that have since lapsed, so past courses. So now, naming aside, we get to choose if we want to pull all of that content in or just specific stuff. So this is something that is going to be important both for this process of bringing things into the course, but also say I'm taking content I built here and putting it in another. That's going to be pretty important if, say, I got a bunch of different versions of assignments. I want to try version 3, but version 2 is still in here. You can kind of pick and choose exactly what you want to bring over and say, Caleb's working with me on this project and he only wants one assignment out of the whole thing we've built here. He can pick and choose that. So all content, pretty self-explanatory. Everything's going to come over. That includes links created with the redirect button or redirect tool in Canvas. So if you added, say, a link to somewhere specific on your course navigation, that would be brought over. Important thing to note, that link will not be changed though. So if you are linking to places in, say, that past term courses, well, something specific to that term that might not work in the next term, you got to make sure that you rectify those links.
Right. But if it's like a redirect link to your Zoom room or something that's always a static address, then that can be copied over pretty easily.
Exactly. So in those cases, you wouldn't have to worry. So if I had my Zoom room link right in here between grades and people, that link would stay the same. But say I was working with a publisher and I had a very specific link that took students to my course with that publisher, that could be an issue that you'd need to double check. So links stay exactly the same. They don't change over like that. So you just want to keep in mind if things need to be updated or not. Always good to double check after you do a course import, right? So in this case, let's just do, let's select specific content so you can kind of see how that works. And then you see this option where we can adjust events and due dates. So obviously, if you import everything as is, you're going to have due dates associated with that past term. This was ran in the fall, so I'm probably going to see a lot of September, October, November, maybe December in those assignment due dates, quiz due dates, that kind of stuff. So what I might want to do is if I click adjust, I can shift these dates as I see fit. So if I know the beginning date of the original course, I can put that in here, and then I can change what it will be. Those adjustments will adjust the assignments and quiz due dates for you. It's never perfect, and that's kind of what I was finding in my testing. So once again, another place where you just want to double check. Canvas tries to be as smart as it can, but sometimes it's always helpful to have that second set of eyes.
Especially if you are trying to have, if all your due dates are on Sunday night, probably you're going to have to go back in and adjust those because Canvas doesn't know if it's moving from a Sunday to a Sunday. It just knows it's moving from October 1st and then it's shifting 60 days forward or something.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And if I click substitution,
shoot. Hey, that's new.
That might answer your
it totally comment. Does. Makes me look dumb, but then we get an answer, so that's excellent.
Well, and this is the thing is, it might not work perfectly, but the hope is that Canvas is catching those instances. If you do have everything due on a Sunday night, if the due dates are really specific to days, I want a student to have 14 days, you probably won't have to worry about this. But like Caleb said, if you are doing things only on a Sunday night or, everything's due Monday morning before we meet, that's kind of where you'd make those adjustments.
Awesome. I didn't know that feature is there, so I just learned something new.
I think it's relatively new from my understanding, but I'm still new to this process as well. So we're all kind of finding those quirks. So let's see if I shift beginning date, whatever it is, to say January 25th, we'll see kind of how it interacts with it. It'll try to do its best, but sometimes it hasn't been working great. So I'll click import, and then it's going to think for a second. Then we see over on the right hand, this is Canvas keeps a list of all of the imports we've done in a course shell. So for instance, if we went to my sandbox course where I do this all the time in, you see a list of everything I've done, you know, where I pulled it from, all that fun stuff. So it kind of helps as a record keeper. But if I then go over to select content, this is where now, like I said, I'm not importing everything, I'm importing exactly what I want. This is where I can then select that stuff. So I could choose the syllabus, though obviously that's probably something that I might be changing depending on the term. So maybe I leave that off. Maybe I go into the modules and I want, you know, the first number, but for whatever reason, I didn't want module 5. Assignments, you can even go into only specific ones, or you can select all of them. Same thing with everything.
Hey, Nick.
You can just be really specific about how you're grabbing stuff. What was that, Caleb?
So if I'm doing this, if I just selected the modules and if I have assignments in my modules, will it copy those over for me, or do I need to select those separately?
That's a good question. Let's try that out while we're kind of messing around in here. From my understanding, it supersedes. So module comes first and it'll grab
so
what's
anything that's in the module,
but
whether it's pages or assignments, it should copy that over.
Yeah, so let's do a test live right now and kind of see so we can answer that question better.
Jenmer says assessments come with modules. Okay, good.
Okay.
I mean, the reason I'm thinking about this is a lot of times instructors that have not been using template courses like this, they're usually just copying content from one quarter to the next, to the next, to the next, which means that after, you know, 4 or 5 or more quarters of teaching a class, you probably have a lot of stuff kind of floating around in those courses that you may not necessarily want to copy into your template course. You might want to have kind of a fresh version of the course to work from. So by selecting just those specific modules, that might be a good way to start from a fairly clean version of the course.
Yeah, good point. Well, looks like our job has been completed. Canvas did its good work. I'm going to come back home and I should, hey, look at that. We got a full course in here now. And just like we were testing, just to double check, we have pages, we have the quizzes, because the modules essentially they're higher up in food chain, you know, pull everything with them that's associated with them. So you don't have to go through and make sure you've checked everything. One thing you'll note, yeah, looks like our dates updated, which is awesome. Like I said, sometimes you have to double check those. Things that were not published in the previous will not be published in this one. And so if I then essentially took this and copied it to a live version, all of these published pages, modules would be published in that version. So it's really mimicking or copying exactly what it sees in the previous course to the next iteration. So now that we've got this populated, this is where I could start editing, going through, adjusting, changing things up, doing whatever I needed to. And then say I get to that point where, oh, I see my course that this is supposed to be associated. Now it's in Canvas. I can go back to my dashboard and I can look through, and we'll use my Sandcastle course for this purpose. But imagine this is my live course. I've got my students in here. They're ready to see content. I've got it all built. I've been working on it all spring break because, you know, I get behind, all that fun stuff. And then I can come in here, and when you jump into the home page of a module, you'll also have that option to import content. So I click right there. It's the same as what you find in settings. Remember, I do this quite a bit in here, so you see a lot. But then I can copy from a Canvas course, just like we did last time. Now I find my template. Did this last time. There we go. Next time, I'm just going to call it test template. In this case, I can do all content if I want. I can do that adjust. And you'll see this is kind of whatever actually this might have been, not sure where it's grabbing that date from, but in this case, let's say I want to move it to February 22nd. Essentially what I'm telling it, you decide the beginning date, whatever it was in the last one, change it to February 22nd, adjust everything forward that way, do those substitutions. I can take away all dates if I want to do everything one by one, click import, and now it's going to get thrown right here with the rest of the content. If I end up finding that I imported something incorrectly and, I need to redo it for any reason, if I import this learning analytics template again, it will override any past learning analytics template material, if that makes sense. So if, say, I missed something or I need to do another adjustment, I can copy over it, and then I'll have that newest version and I won't have any of the old materials, so to speak.
So it won't just make a second copy. It'll override the previous one.
It will not make a second copy. It will override it. So anytime you import it the second time, it will override anything that matches up with something that was already in there.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So essentially, if I come back to my home page, you'll kind of see how crazy my sandbox space is. If I scroll all the way down, here we go. Here's my modules from that learning analytics course template. This is the material that was in it previously. So essentially it comes in sequentially. It's all in order, which is something that we like since we were struggling with that with the blueprints. But say I mess this up or I make an edit on my template to my introduction, I could redo that introduction in my template, and then I could import it back over, and it would essentially wipe out this version with whatever came over from the template. Does that kind of help solidify things?
I think so.
More or less. So far, we've built a new course, just a blank slate for us to work in. We've then imported material in, so copied however little we want. We've then brought it over to another course that we're a teacher in. Is that workflow making sense? A little bit. It's kind of clear as mud right now, but people might need to get their hands in there to kind of feel it out. Okay. Now I think since we're kind of hitting that last 7-10 minutes, I was going to open up the floor for questions. How do you see yourself using this? Does this align with workflows you're doing, or do you feel like you'll have to adjust? Do you think you've got a better way that will work better for you? I'm kind of curious to feel out the room here. And if Caleb, you see anything in the chat, since I'm in the classroom, I won't be able to see it.
Yeah, so Jennifer is saying that she makes templates for each course for each quarter that the course is taught. So she would have class 1 fall, class 1 winter, class 1 spring, class 2 fall,
nice.
Class 2 winter, class 2 spring, which is, on the one hand, that's a lot to keep control of. But if you if you have very different course schedules each quarter, then that probably in the long run saves a lot of time compared to copying from a single template and then manually adjusting all the dates and sequencing of everything every quarter. So that's one way that,
sure.
So some people would do it that way. Some people just have a single template for each of the different courses that they teach, and then every quarter they copy it into the new course shell for that quarter. I've also seen some instructors, they'll have, rather than a template for an entire course, they'll have templates for specific components that they reuse over and over. Like, your course information or your Start Here module is probably very similar or identical for every course you teach. You probably have the same similar syllabus quizzes and that sort of thing. And the only thing different would be the syllabus for that specific course. So you might put that in a template, and then it's easy to copy it into every course every quarter. And it's easy to have a single up-to-date version of that module that you can always reuse. And then there's also people where departments will have shared template courses. You know, if you have 3 or 4 faculty that all teach different sections of the same course, and they want to share material, share tests or resources or module designs, then they all have teacher access to that template course and they can all pull from it.
I have a question. I can't find my hand in time. There it is. I might have missed this when I first came in. I came in about a minute late, but can you talk just a little bit about why I shouldn't do what I do, which is when I'm teaching a course that I haven't taught in a while, I go back and find the old version of it in whatever quarter it was, and I just copy that instead of taking this step of doing a template in between.
I think if it's a course you don't teach very often, then that's probably fine. I think where templates really help with your workflow is if you are teaching the same course every quarter, quarter after quarter, and you want to make sure that you have one single place that has the most up-to-date version of that course, then I think the template makes more sense. If it's a course you might teach once every 3 years or something, maybe it's not as necessary to follow those steps. Although, again, you know, if you have like that start here module that you use every quarter in all your courses, and you're constantly trying to make that the best start here module you possibly could, then you might not want to pull the version from 3 years ago because you've gone light years beyond that in your other courses.
Yep. You just answered it. That's exactly what has happened to me. I'm just remembering now that I do that and think it's okay. And then somewhere down the line in the quarter, I realize, hey, this isn't the most, I don't do it this way anymore. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And maybe to add just to kind of that quality of life element to it, I like it a lot. And this is why I use it the most, is for collaboration. Like I'm working with somebody, maybe an instructor, and we're working on a singular assignment together. I can quickly build a shell. It's very specific to this purpose. Maybe we're just building one assignment, one module, something like that. I can put them in as a teacher. We can build together. They can see what I'm doing. I can see what they're doing. And then they, just like me, can copy it to wherever they need it. So it also has that element of kind of allowing you to work in the same space. And something I ran into recently was an instructor was put in as a teacher of a course and was working with an instructor. So somebody was mentoring another, and that course ends, and then that other instructor has trouble finding it because it's not their course. They don't quite remember the course code, and it's like, yeah, it's not their space. It's not a place they inhabit normally. So they're constantly kind of working with the other instructor, make sure they get access. And there's kind of that element where, oh, if we just had a template, we'd be able to go to the same place each time and then pull from it as we need. Don't have to go searching as much. So yeah, still, I guess, in that quality of life arena.
We've got another question in the chat. Do previously taught courses ever disappear? And the answer to that is no, really not ever. Like every course that has ever been created in Canvas is always there and always available. But courses that were taught in a particular quarter do conclude. And I believe once a course has concluded, correct me if I'm wrong, Nick or Ben, can you still edit a concluded course, or does it kind of get sort of frozen in place?
I'm gonna move that over to Jerry because I'm not positive.
I think Jerry had to leave, so he.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would have asked Jerry.
Well,
I can't remember.
Yeah,
I know.
I'm not sure.
I was just going to say, I know when the course is concluded, there are some barriers that you can access, but you can change the dates on it. You can fudge when it was concluded, or put no end date, or turn it to continuous enrollment.
Yeah, although then that might have some consequences for the students that were in that class, because suddenly it'll pop back up in their course list. But that's another advantage of having a template course is the template course is always open because it's not connected to a term, so it never concludes, and it never has students in it. So it's just always open and available and easily accessible and easily edited.
Yeah, and one thing that's helped me with templates, kind of back to Jared's question of why, is when I was teaching 2 different classes that are the same, they kind of go different directions a little bit. I was adding new stuff, building the plane while I'm flying it, and they end up 2 different things at the end of the course. Maybe different announcements, maybe some of the quiz questions are different, so maybe even some of the activities change. So it was kind of nice to figure out where I wanted to go with that. What's up, Mac?
I want to just go back and underline what was stated about putting in a conclusion date on there, because every once in a while I don't, and a student says, hey, will you somehow remove this from my list of courses? And I say, oh, I don't know how to do that. And then I realize I just never put a conclusion date on it.
Yeah. So yes, if a course does not have a conclusion date and students are enrolled in it, I believe they continue seeing it even after the quarter is concluded. So that's, if you do kind of set custom start or end dates, you always want to try to remember to go back and turn those back off.
And while I've got some time, and since nobody else jumped in fast enough, the way I do this is once I have my course published for the term, the day before class, hopefully, and sometimes it's the day after classes start too, that happens. Then I go back and I clear out the old template, and I just import the newly updated stuff back into my template. And as the quarter goes on, if I'm making any changes to the quarter, I go back into the template and make the same change. This is especially useful because I'm often teaching 2 sections of the same course, so I don't want to be tripling my work.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting, different people I think have different philosophies for how they kind of maintain their golden version of the class, right? Some people will kind of make those changes on the fly during the quarter. One of my personal mentors, he keeps a giant 3-ring binder of his course, and he makes annotations as he goes along. And then at the end of the class, he sits down for an hour, he looks through all of those annotations, and then he makes the changes for the following class. And that's his workflow. It's very old school, but it works for him. I think the key is, what is the workflow that makes sense to you? And then make sure you stick with it so that you are not ever having to go back and say, okay, what the heck, where did I make that change? Which course was it in? Which section? What did I do differently this time? As long as you have a system in place that makes sense for you, you're going to save a lot of time in the long run. Well, I think we are kind of out of time for the day. I think hopefully this was helpful to people and gave you some ideas. Like Nick said, templates and creating new courses are not the most complicated thing in the world. But if you do it well and have a system in place that works for you, it will save you so much time and mental bandwidth in the future from quarter to quarter. Nick, is there anything else we want to hit on before we call it a day?
No, I just appreciate all the questions and the great conversation. And I know that all of our instructors will kind of find the way that this plugs in best for them. That's always there's no one size fits all, but maybe we can provide the belt that keeps everything together.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks everybody for attending. Next week, I think we'll have a tech talk next week, but we haven't figured out our schedule for February yet. We're doing that later this afternoon. So keep an eye out for a newsletter, hopefully early next week, and we will see you at the next Tech Talks.
See y'all then.
Okay, and the stream is